Imagine a world where the most influential book ever written is not just a collection of stories and teachings, but a living, breathing entity that has evolved over centuries. The Bible, a text that has shaped the course of human history, is not a static document. It is a dynamic tapestry of interpretations, each thread woven by the hands of those who have read it, studied it, and lived by it. This video will explore the complex journey of biblical interpretation, from the early Christian rule of faith to the intricate methods of the rabbis, and how these interpretations have shaped the religions of Judaism and Christianity. In the 2nd century CE, the rule of faith emerged as a framework for understanding the New Testament. This rule was not a direct reflection of the New Testament itself, but a synthesis of its key themes, filtered through the lenses of John and Paul. The rule of faith emphasized a fourfold scheme: creation, fall, restoration in Christ, and consummation at the Last Judgment. These elements are present in the New Testament, but they are not equally prominent in every part of the text. For instance, the Synoptic Gospels Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and the non-Pauline letters do not present these themes with the same emphasis as the rule of faith. The rule of faith shifted the focus from Jesus as the proclaimer to Jesus as the proclaimed. It placed Jesus in a Trinitarian context, which, while hinted at in the New Testament, was not fully developed until later. This shift was necessary for the early Christian church, which needed a coherent and unified belief system to combat heresies and establish its identity. However, this also meant that certain aspects of the New Testament, such as Jesus' teachings and healings, were downplayed in favor of more doctrinal elements. Finding a single, overarching theme in the Bible is a daunting task. The Bible is a vast and diverse collection of texts, written over centuries by different authors in different contexts. For many strands of Judaism, the unity of the religion lies not in a single theme, but in patterns of belief and practice. Judaism is a religion of action, where the biblical text is a guide but not the sole authority. Practices and traditions are often more central to Jewish identity than a strict interpretation of the biblical text. In contrast, Christianity has been more focused on belief. The early Christian church developed a hermeneutic, or a framework for interpretation, to make sense of the Bible. The rule of faith was a crucial part of this hermeneutic, capturing what early Christians saw as the central aspects of the biblical texts. For modern readers, however, the selection of these central aspects can seem arbitrary. Why, for example, is the bodily ascension of Jesus, mentioned only twice in the New Testament, emphasized in the rule of faith, while his teachings and healings, which take up a significant portion of the Gospels, are not? The answer lies in the context of the 2nd century church. Issues like the ascension and the nature of the Trinity were pressing concerns at the time, and the church read the New Testament through the lens of these issues. The New Testament became an answer to questions that were not necessarily the same as those its authors originally raised. Over time, layers of interpretation were superimposed on the text, and it is only in modern times that we have begun to recognize and try to separate these layers from the original text. The Mekhilta of Rabbi Ishmael, a Jewish commentary on the second half of the book of Exodus, provides a fascinating glimpse into the world of early rabbinic interpretation, produced in the 2nd century CE. The Mekhilta is concerned with how to observe the laws and precepts in Exodus. It is a prime example of halakha, or practical instruction on how to live. The Mekhilta, along with other rabbinic texts, reflects a Judaism that, after the destruction of the temple, became centered on the study and observance of the biblical text. One of the most intriguing aspects of rabbinic interpretation is the way it uses the Bible. For the rabbis, any passage in the Bible can illuminate any other passage, regardless of the date or authorship of the texts. This approach, known as intertextuality, sees the Bible as a web of interconnected texts. Verbal similarity is often sufficient for one text to be used to interpret another, even if the passages are not thematically related. For example, the Mekhilta uses passages from Isaiah and Judges to determine which arm to wear tefillin on, despite the fact that these passages have nothing to do with the custom of tefillin. Rabbinic interpretation also emphasizes the significance of every feature of the text. Every word, every detail, is seen as meaningful and potentially revealing. This approach can lead to creative and sometimes surprising interpretations. For instance, the rabbis might link Abraham's testing in Genesis to a verse in Psalms, using homonyms to draw connections between seemingly unrelated texts. The rabbis also saw the Bible as a source of authority for all customs and practices, even if a custom is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible. The rabbis would find a way to justify it using biblical texts. This approach underscores the idea that the Bible is not just a collection of stories, but a living guide for daily life. The boundary between the biblical text and rabbinic interpretation is often blurred, making it difficult to determine whether a scriptural text gave rise to a certain ruling or whether the ruling was read into the text. The Bible is a book that has been interpreted and reinterpreted over centuries, each generation adding its own layer of meaning. From the 2nd century Christian rule of faith to the intricate methods of the rabbis, the journey of biblical interpretation is a testament to the dynamic nature of religious texts. As we continue to explore and understand the Bible, we must recognize the complex interplay between the original text and the layers of interpretation that have been superimposed on it. The Bible, in all its complexity, remains a powerful and enduring source of inspiration and guidance.